The Tolling Void by T.R.Weich. Chapter 1. Inheritance. The bell hung in Grandpa's attic like a tumor made of bronze. I'd been living in the old Victorian for 3 weeks, telling myself the 12-hour shifts at the plant were worth it for free rent. The house creaked with decades of accumulated secrets, but I needed the isolation. City life had drained my bank account and my sanity in equal measure. The attic discovery happened by accident, chasing a leak that dripped brown water into my bedroom. The bell dominated the space, easily 4 feet tall, its surface green with age and neglect. No clapper, just an empty mouth that seemed to swallow light. The thing was impossibly heavy. I'd tried moving it twice, thinking it might be worth something. Both times, the moment my hands touched the bronze, vertigo hit like a sledgehammer. The metal felt wrong. Too cold, too smooth, like skin that had never seen sunlight. That first night, I made the mistake of sleeping with my bedroom door open. The toll came at 3:17 a.m. Deep, resonant, it rolled through the house like thunder trapped in a bottle. My eyes snapped open, heart hammering against my ribs. The sound didn't fade. It grew, vibrating in my chest, my teeth, the spaces between my bones. I found myself on the attic stairs without remembering the decision to climb them. The bell hung motionless, yet the air around it shimmered with residual energy. When I pressed my palm against its surface, ice shot up my arm. For a moment, just a heartbeat, I swore the bronze pulsed like living tissue. "Impossible," I whispered. The word echoed back from the bell's throat, distorted into something that sounded like laughter. Chapter 2. Research. Murphy's Tavern reeked of stale beer and older secrets. The kind of dive where information flowed more freely than the tap beer, where old-timers nursed grudges alongside their whiskey. Eddie Kowalski had been Grandpa's drinking buddy for 40 years. Liver-spotted hands wrapped around his glass, he squinted at me through cataracts that resembled cracked ice. "Your grandfather ever tell you where he got that bell?" Eddie's laugh turned into a cough that shook his entire frame. "Bought it off some drifter, maybe 73, 74. Guy claimed it was from a church that burned down. Said it could call things. Harold thought that was hilarious until..." He stopped, beer foam clinging to his mustache. Until what? Until the night he started screaming about the stars watching him. The old man's eyes found mine, suddenly clear. 3 days before he died, Harold called me, 2 in the morning, babbling about how the sky was wrong, how something was listening. Found him the next week, face down in his garden. Coroner said heart attack, but Harold's eyes... Eddie shuddered. Never seen terror like that freeze on a dead man's face. I bought Eddie another round, but he wouldn't say more. That night, the bell tolled for 27 minutes straight. Chapter 3. Patterns. The tolling developed a rhythm. First night, 1 toll at 3:17 a.m. Second night, 3 tolls, spaced exactly 12 minutes apart. Third night, 7 tolls, the intervals shrinking. I started keeping a journal, mapping the progression. Whatever logic governed the bell's behavior, it wasn't random. Each toll lasted exactly 43 seconds. Each one penetrated deeper into my skull, leaving a residual hum that lasted until dawn. By the 4th night, I'd barricaded my bedroom door and stuffed cotton in my ears. The sound came anyway, not through the air but through the house itself, through wood and brick and the iron pipes that ran like arteries through the walls. I found myself standing in the attic without remembering the walk upstairs. The bell had changed, subtle alterations that my rational mind tried to dismiss, a slight lean that hadn't been there before, shadows that fell at impossible angles. When I shone my flashlight directly at it, the beam seemed to bend, drawn into the bronze surface like light into a black hole. My phone died the moment I tried to photograph it. The battery showed full charge, but the screen remained black. I tried 3 different devices. Same result. Whatever energy the bell radiated, it consumed electronics like acid. That's when I started digging through Grandpa's belongings in earnest. Chapter 4. The Journal. Grandpa's handwriting had deteriorated over his final months. Neat cursive devolving into desperate scratches. March 15th, bell tolled again. Counted 17 times. "The neighbors don't hear it?" asked Mrs. Chen next door. She looked at me like I'd lost my mind. "Maybe I have..." March 20th, can't sleep. The sound gets in my bones, stays there. Saw Dr. Martinez, he says tinnitus. Prescribed pills, they don't help. How do you medicate something that lives in your soul? March 28th, it's not just sound anymore. The bell shows me things when it rings, windows in the air, glimpses of somewhere else, somewhere dark. I think something's looking back. April 2nd, found symbols carved into the attic floorboards around the bell. Weren't there before. I know every inch of this house. They're growing, spreading like cancer through the wood. The geometry hurts to look at. The entries became increasingly frantic, filled with sketches that made my eyes water, diagrams of star patterns that seemed to move when I wasn't looking directly at them, mathematical equations that resolved into impossible results. The final entry, dated 3 days before his death, the drifter came back, standing in my garden at midnight pointing at the bell. His face was wrong, too many eyes, mouth that went too deep. He spoke without words. It's not yours. It was never yours. You're just the keeper until the door opens wide enough. I understand now. The bell isn't calling to something. It's calling something here. And I think it's almost finished. God help whoever finds this. God help whoever can't resist listening. Chapter 5. Escalation. The tolling came every hour on the 8th night. I'd given up trying to sleep, instead pacing the first floor, while the house shuddered around me. Each toll felt like a physical blow, pressure that built behind my eyes until I thought my skull might crack. That's when I noticed the neighbors. Mrs. Chen stood in her yard at 2 a.m., motionless as a statue, face turned toward my house. Mr. Petrov from across the street joined her, then the college kids from the rental next door, all of them staring at my attic window with expressions of vacant hunger. None of them blinked. I watched through my living room curtains as more people emerged from houses throughout the neighborhood. They formed a loose circle around my property, silent sentinels in various states of undress. Some had been pulled from sleep, still wearing pajamas. Others looked like they'd been walking for hours. All of them heard the bell. All of them were waiting for something. When I stepped onto my front porch, they turned toward me in perfect unison. 23 faces, all wearing the same empty smile. Mrs. Chen opened her mouth and spoke in my grandfather's voice. The door is almost open. I slammed back inside, locked every entrance, pulled every curtain, but I could feel them out there, patient as stones, listening to the bell's song with rapture that bordered on religious ecstasy. Chapter 6. The Attempt. I'd always been good with tools. 10 years in construction before the plant job had taught me how to break things that didn't want to break. The sledgehammer felt good in my hands, 20 pounds of steel and purpose. If I couldn't move the bell, I'd destroy it, end whatever was happening before it got worse. The first blow rang like a gunshot. The bell didn't crack, didn't even show a scratch. Instead, it sang, a pure, crystalline note that made my teeth ache and my vision blur. The sound reverberated through my bones, and for a moment I saw what Grandpa had seen. Windows in the air. Tears in reality itself. Through those gaps, something immense pressed against the boundaries of our world. Not malevolent exactly, but utterly alien. A presence so vast that human consciousness could only perceive fragments. The curve of something that might have been a limb. The suggestion of eyes that spanned light years. Intelligence that operated on scales beyond human comprehension. It was beautiful and terrible and absolutely wrong. The vision lasted 3 seconds. When it faded, I was on my knees, blood trickling from my nose. The bell swayed gently, as if touched by an unfelt breeze. Outside, the neighbors were singing. 23 voices harmonizing in a language that predated human speech, their words rising and falling with the bell's residual vibrations. I ran. Chapter 7. Revelation. The Millbrook Public Library stayed open until 9 p.m. on weekdays. I spent 6 hours in the local history section, pulling every book, every newspaper archive, every microfiche record that mentioned the bell or the drifter who'd sold it to Grandpa. The pattern stretched back decades. 1952, the Hendricks family, previous owners of my house, reported strange tolling sounds from their attic. All 4 family members disappeared on the same night. House sat empty for 21 years. 1931. Church of St. Bartholomew burned down under mysterious circumstances. 7 bells were salvaged from the wreckage. 6 were sold to other churches throughout the state. The 7th went missing. 1897. A traveling preacher named Silas Crane was arrested for practices contrary to Christian doctrine. Witnesses described him ringing a large bell while chanting in unknown languages, claiming he could open doors to heaven. He escaped custody 2 days later. The bell disappeared with him. The newspaper clipping from 1897 included a sketch of Silas Crane. Even rendered in crude black and white, something about his face was wrong. Too many eyes, mouth that went too deep. The same face Grandpa had described in his final journal entry. I understood then. The bell wasn't just some antique with a dark history. It was a key, turned by sound, opening doorways that should remain closed. And something on the other side had been waiting a very long time for the lock to finally turn. Chapter 8. The Opening. I returned home to find my front door standing open. The neighbors were gone, but their absence felt more ominous than their presence. The street was too quiet, devoid of the usual sounds of suburban life. No traffic, no dogs barking, no air conditioners humming. Even the insects had fallen silent. Inside, the bell's tolling had changed. Instead of discrete, measured strikes, it now produced a continuous drone that made the house vibrate like a tuning fork. Plaster dust drifted from the ceiling. Windows rattled in their frames. I climbed to the attic. The bell hung at a severe angle now, tilted toward the floorboards as if something invisible pulled it downward. The bronze surface had developed a patina of symbols, the same writhing script I'd seen in Grandpa's journal, but deeper, more complex. They pulsed with their own light, spelling words in a language that hurt to understand. Beneath the bell, the floorboards had splintered. Through the gaps, I glimpsed not the first-floor ceiling, but something else entirely. A vast space filled with shifting geometries that defied description. The wrongness of it made my brain itch. Something was coming through. Not climbing or crawling, but simply existing more fully in our reality with each vibration of the bell. I caught glimpses. The curve of something vast and organic, surfaces that might have been flesh or metal or something in between. Eyes that spanned impossible distances. Intelligence that regarded our world with the casual interest of a child examining an ant farm. The bell's tone shifted, deepened, became something that wasn't quite sound. My ears began to bleed. That's when I knew what I had to do. Chapter 9. Descent. The thing about cosmic horror is that it's not actually malevolent. It's indifferent, which is infinitely worse. I understood that as I descended into the space beneath my house. A place that shouldn't exist but somehow did, expanding with each toll of the bell. The geometry was wrong, walls meeting at angles that shouldn't be possible, gravity pulling in directions that made my inner ear scream, but I kept walking. The bell's song guided me through impossible corridors, past rooms filled with machinery that looked grown rather than built. Everything pulsed with the same rhythm, the same frequency that had been drilling into my skull for weeks. At the center of it all, I found the source, not the bell. That was just the key. The source was older, vaster, a presence that existed partially in our reality, and partially somewhere else. It had been waiting at the threshold for decades, maybe centuries, growing stronger each time someone rang the bell. Now it was almost ready to come through completely. I could feel its attention focusing on me, alien intelligence examining this small human who had wandered into its domain. It didn't communicate in words, but in concepts that downloaded directly into my consciousness. Thank you for opening the door. We've been so patient. Your world will make such interesting sounds when we reshape it. That's when I realized the truth. The bell hadn't been calling something here. It had been announcing our presence to something already waiting. Earth wasn't being invaded. It was being noticed. And that attention would change everything in ways human minds couldn't comprehend or survive. But there was still a choice to make. Chapter 10. The Decision. I could feel the entity's amusement as I approached the bell. Not the bronze artifact in my attic. That was just an anchor point, a physical focus for something much larger. The real bell existed here, in this space between spaces, a crystalline structure that resonated with frequencies that remade matter at the atomic level. Touch it, and the door would swing wide open. Refuse. And the entity would simply wait for the next keeper, the next house, the next person desperate enough to listen to the tolling and mistake it for opportunity rather than invitation. But there was a third option. The entity was vast but not omnipotent. It needed anchor points, focal objects, willing participants. Remove those, and it would be forced to retreat to whatever realm it called home. The crystalline bell was beautiful, a structure of impossible complexity that sang with the voices of galaxies. As I reached toward it, I felt the entity's excitement building, anticipation crackling through the air like static electricity. Instead of touching it, I spoke, "No." The single word echoed through the impossible space. And for the first time since this began, the tolling stopped. Not faded, stopped. The sudden silence was so profound it made my ears ring. The entity's attention sharpened to a point that made my skull ache. Confusion replaced amusement. This wasn't part of the pattern it had established over centuries of patient recruitment. "I understand what you are," I continued, surprised by the steadiness of my own voice. "And I understand what you want, but this world, my world, isn't yours to take." The response came as a wave of pure contempt that nearly drove me to my knees. The entity showed me visions of what it could offer. Transcendence beyond human comprehension, existence on scales that spanned cosmic time. All I had to do was complete the ritual, ring the bell one final time. "No," I repeated. The entity's fury was a living thing, pressing against my consciousness like a tsunami of rage. The crystalline bell began to crack, hairline fractures spreading across its surface. The impossible architecture around us groaned and shifted. But I held my ground. Because I'd realized something the entity hadn't considered, the bell needed a willing participant. Force wouldn't work. Coercion wouldn't work. It required genuine choice, genuine cooperation, and I was choosing to walk away. Chapter 11. Collapse. The return journey was a nightmare of collapsing geometries and spaces folding in on themselves. The entity's rage followed me through corridors that twisted into Mobius strips, past rooms where the walls bled colors that had no names. But I kept walking, following the fading echo of the bell's song back toward reality. I emerged in my attic gasping, covered in dust that tasted like copper and ozone. The bronze bell lay in fragments, its surface cracked like an eggshell. Black ichor leaked from the cracks, hissing where it touched the floorboards. The house shuddered around me, structural timbers groaning as whatever pocket dimension I'd accessed collapsed. Plaster dust rained from the ceiling. Windows exploded outward in showers of glittering glass. I ran. Outside, the neighborhood was waking up. People emerged from their houses looking confused, disoriented, with no memory of standing in their yards singing in alien languages. Mrs. Chen waved at me from her garden, apparently oblivious to the chaos. Behind me, my grandfather's house settled into itself with a sound like breaking bones. Epilogue. Aftermath. The insurance company blamed the destruction on a gas leak. Structural damage throughout the house, they said. Dangerous levels of subsidence that had destabilized the foundation. The place was condemned, torn down within a month. I used the settlement money to move back to the city, find a small apartment, return to a life that made sense. For 3 weeks, I thought I'd won. Then I heard it, soft, distant, barely audible above the city's constant noise. Not the deep bronze tolling of the bell, but something else, a chime, delicate as crystal, resonating not from any external source, but from somewhere inside my own chest. The entity hadn't given up. It had simply changed tactics. Instead of using the bell to call something to our world, it had embedded itself in me. A seed of alien consciousness that grew a little stronger each day, fed by my own thoughts and memories. I could feel it learning, adapting, preparing for the day when it would be strong enough to ring its own bell. That was 6 months ago. Now I sit in coffee shops and libraries, watching people go about their daily lives, and I wonder who among them might be desperate enough, lonely enough, hungry enough to listen If I started speaking about the things that wait in the spaces between spaces, the tolling has stopped, but the silence is worse, because silence means it's finished growing. Silence means it's ready to begin again. And this time, it won't need a bell. It has me. The end